What is going on, you guys? Orange Trailblazer here. We all have buyer's remorse once in a while, and I am no exception to that rule. Today we're going to be talking about some of my gear regrets, what I chose to replace them with, and why. Alright you guys, so before we get into it, let me just start off by saying none of this gear is necessarily bad, it just wasn't right for me and my preferences. With that being said, let's get started. Alright you guys, so my first gear regret is buying a tent that was too small. This is the Mech Spark 1. It was a one-person tent that weighed about 2 pounds, and it was very light and very easy to pack into my backpack. The issue was that it was too small for me to be comfortable at night. I didn't have room to change, and I didn't have room to even set up. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. If all you're wanting is a place for you to sleep at night, then this tent is the way to go. But I wanted a bit more room at night, so I decided to keep this tent as a loner tent and move on to something else. Alright, so what I moved on to was the MSR Hubba Hubba. This is a two-person tent and it still weighs about 2 pounds. The main difference is that this tent has 2 vestibules, 2 doors, obviously enough room for 2 people, or basically enough room for me to lay down and have enough room for my gear as well. This tent is a bit more on the pricier side, but for me it was very much worth it, just so that way I could still have a lightweight tent and have enough room for me to be comfortable while I'm trying to sleep. Alright you guys, so the next thing on my list is going to be a sleeping bag that wasn't warm enough. So this is the Mech Centuris Plus 5 sleeping bag. This has a synthetic fill. It was a lot cheaper and a lot lighter than a -5 sleeping bag. And that was kind of the main thing that made me buy this sleeping bag, is that it was a lot cheaper than some of the other options. Now, while this is a great sleeping bag for the summer months, the second it starts to get a little bit cooler, or we're getting into fall or maybe early spring, the sleeping bag doesn't quite keep me warm enough, and the last thing you want to have is a sleeping bag that's not warm enough for you at night, because not only can that be uncomfortable, it can actually be very dangerous in some situations. Alright, so what I chose to replace it with was the Mech Talon -5. This is a down sleeping bag, so not only am I getting a much warmer sleeping bag, but it's also going to be a lot lighter. Now again, this was a little bit more of an expensive sleeping bag, but considering the fact that this is pretty much the only sleeping bag I need for 3 seasons, it's definitely very much worth the money. It's also saved me a lot of space in my bag because of its down fill power. I can actually compress it a lot more than I could the synthetic fill. Another aspect about the sleeping bag is the fact that this is actually a long sleeping bag. The other one that I have was a little too short for me, and I found it was very uncomfortable for my feet. My feet actually ended up getting a little bit cold because they were pressed right up against the edge of the sleeping bag. So with this one being a little bit longer, I have a little more room to move around, and thus making me a bit more comfortable, and I have a hard time sleeping at night as it is, so that just makes it all the better. Alright you guys, so staying with the theme of sleep, my next gear regret is actually not having a piece of gear and trying to use a substitution for it. So instead of buying an actual pillow, what I did was I took a dry bag and stuffed it full of clothes that I wasn't wearing over the night, and I just thought, oh okay, this is nice and soft and squishy, I should be able to use this as a pillow. The problem is, as your head starts to sink down, it actually just pushes the fabric off to the side, and your head ends up just turning into a hot dog in between 2 massive pieces of fabric. And you're not actually being supported at all. So this thing is really just making you more uncomfortable. Not to mention, with a dry bag type fabric, all this thing is going to be doing is sliding around your sleeping mat. So after a while, what I decided to do is invest my money and get a proper pillow. Now when I say invest your money, it's not like this is a big investment. This thing maybe cost me about $20. So this is the Mech Deluxe pillow. This is filled with the trimmings of their sleeping bags and their sleeping pads. It is half foam and half bag. So when you're not using this thing actually compresses really small to fit nice and tight inside of your bag. And I'm telling you guys, I get such a better sleep with this thing. I actually take this with me even if I'm just traveling. Alright guys, so for those of you that don't know, before I got into backpacking, I was pretty into bushcraft. So naturally when I started doing backpacking, I wanted to bring a big knife with me. So that way I can carve anything that I felt like I needed to carve, I could process wood, there's all these things I knew how to do with a knife. And while that may have been true, I honestly never really needed a knife this big. This is a Buck Selkirk. This is meant for skinning game as well as processing wood. And while it's really awesome for hunters and bushcrafters, it's really not necessary for the type of backpacking that I was going to be doing. Even if I needed to process wood, odds are I was going to be bringing a small axe with me if I was just going to be going out and setting up a camp for a single day and then coming right back out. Although if I'm going to be going out for a longer period of time, I'm not even going to be bringing that with me. So what I decided to switch to was this little guy. This is the Gerber Dime, you guys. So this is actually a multi-tool, and it's got a bunch of handy little things on it, but not a whole lot of things that you're never gonna use. It does have a small knife on it, which is good for getting into things like packages or, you know, cutting rope or things like that. The main thing that I use on this thing is actually the scissors, and that is just for, you know, when your clothes have a little bit of loose fabric and you want to just cut it off instead of just having this thing pull your shirt apart. This thing is honestly so much more handy than a big old knife that I honestly never really used when I was out backpacking. And this thing does actually have a small knife on it. So even if I do need to cut something, odds are it's not going to be, you know, a big old tree, or I'm not going to be processing game or anything like that. I just need a little something to cut open a package or something. And this thing is just fine for things like that. So with how heavy this thing is and how much room it actually takes up, the fact that I can just pop it into my pocket and completely forget about it is actually really nice, instead of having to worry about having a big knife with me and worrying about freaking people out that are also out on the trail. All right, guys, so the last thing on my list of gear regrets is gonna be a pair of hiking boots. Now, you might be thinking, okay, I'm going out backpacking or you're going out hiking, you need a pair of hiking boots. If you're going out into really, really rough terrain where there's going to be sharp rocks or really high weeds, then yeah, you might need a pair of hiking boots, but it's going to be really more to protect your ankles from things like sharp rocks or vegetation that's a little too high. Well, hiking boots very much do have their purpose, and they're usually going to be a lot tougher and they're going to last you a really long time. Most of the time, they're really overkill for what you guys are going to be needing. So what I bring with me 90% of the time, guys, is just a pair of trail runners. So these not only are a lot lighter and a lot more comfortable, they also dry a lot faster. Odds are your feet are going to be getting wet at some point or another, so you may as well have something that's going to dry it out a lot quicker. But not only do I use these things for hiking and camping, I actually use these things for trail running. So I get 2 uses out of them instead of just 1. All right, you guys, that's going to do it for this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like and subscribe and let me know what your thoughts are in the comments down below. If you haven't already, check me out over on Instagram, where every Tuesday I'll be sharing a quick tip on something that you can take on your next outdoor adventure. All right, you guys, I'll see you in the next one.